I think the call, the call of God, the specific leading of the Holy Spirit in your life, those are the anchor points that will keep you there through the hard stuff. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of really difficult times, and financially and culturally and transition stuff and personally. I mean, just go through these ups and downs of life and ministry. And what really anchored us there, I feel like, was we kept coming back to this. Well, we really believe God called us here. He hasn't shown us anything different. He has provided for us. I mean, it's not crazy provision, but it's enough. We're okay. God's taking care of us. So for us, we would kind of weigh all those all the time. Like, is this ridiculous, or is this like God's call?
Scott Cunningham, welcome to the Churchfront Worship and Tech Podcast.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Luke. Appreciate it. Great to be with you.
You bet. Thanks for joining us. First of all, tell our listeners a little bit more about you and who you are, what you do, what you're up to these days.
Yeah, so I am been married for about 30 years almost, and I've got 5 beautiful daughters, and we've been in vocational ministry for close to 30 years as well. And so I'm a worship leader, worship pastor. Started a school of worship about 22 years ago, and am now joined a nonprofit called Likewise Worship that just provides pastoral care, community, and resources for worship leaders in Orange County. So we have a number of different area directors, and I became the Orange County area director here this last year. And so it's been a big season of transition for us, kind of stepping out of church vocational ministry and then stepping into a nonprofit. But it's been a huge blessing and a great new season, and really amazing team that we're a part of. And I love the heart and the vision of it. So we just get to really care for leaders, and just try to encourage them as much as possible to be healthy and humble and faithful and what God's called them to do. So that's my new role.
I love that. I want to know a little bit more about your background coming into, pastoral ministry, worship ministry. Where did that start? How did that come to fruition in your life? Do you mind sharing some of your backstory there?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I grew up in a home where my parents, brought us up in the Lord. My mom was a worship leader, involved with children's ministry stuff, and so she got us singing, my brother and I, and stuff since we were young. I grew up at a church called Calvary Chapel Costa Mesa here in Orange County, with a kind of a legendary pastor leader in the area, Chuck Smith, who was the Lord had used pretty radically to open the doors to the church to a really lost generation of hippies and the whole Jesus People revival thing. Jesus Revolution movie just came out about it, so we kind of grew up around that as a kid, and it was just this thriving, overflowing, just cup of ministry and music. It was very music driven ministry as well. I mean, there was concerts all the time, and a lot of bands that would kind of spin out of that. He obviously had the early hippie bands and the praise albums. And so a lot of Maranatha Music was the first Christian music label that started there at Calvary. And so a lot of history of music. So I just grew up around it. I was in these kids groups, singing groups called Salty Kids Praise. This is Salty the Singing Songbook, which if you grew up and you're my age, you might have heard of that. Yeah. You're younger, you have no idea, and just don't look it up on YouTube. But but it was interesting because it was really formative in our life. It gave us, a real heart for ministry, and music. We started recording when we were real young, and so around those kind of environments a lot. So I grew up, pursuing music, and kind of had a vision for my life that I wanted to follow, and a lot of those things fell apart. I mean, I was a Christian, but I was kind of, an ambitious young Christian that had a vision for my life that wasn't really the Lord's vision. So after some difficult seasons, the Lord just kind of broke me down in a very kind way to where I was ready to like open my hands and go, okay, Lord, whatever you want, whatever your purpose is, you made me this, with these gifts and with this heart, Lord, I pray that you're like this season of really surrender. And that was the beginning of a journey of the Lord brought me to Bible college. I would end up meeting my wife there. We both felt very called to ministry. I grew up playing drums and singing, but a little bit of piano, but everybody at Bible college played guitar.
Yeah.
So I started learning guitar and 3 chords and 3 songs, and I'd play them as much and as often as possible. And I'd start leading for our devotional time and at the Bible college, and then started writing songs a little bit back then. And so, yeah, that began, and that was kind of that was kind of earlier 90s. So the term worship leader wasn't as common. It was just starting to become a thing, more common, to have a worship leader on a church staff. When I was at Calvary growing up, John Wickham was the worship leader, Phil Wickham's dad there back in the day. And so they were amazing. His mom and dad were just incredible worship leaders, and just, they'd bring out some of the older hymns. They'd play some more modern songs. They just have a great variety, but it was very congregational, very worshipful, very Christ-centered. And that just really, impacted me as a young man. And then, just this growing desire to kind of do the same. And so at Bible college, we would, started to lead. So anyways, about a year later, we went on staff at a church, Calvary Chapel Vista, which is kind of North County, San Diego. And I was a youth pastor / worship leader / radio, Bible study editor / drummer. I mean, just did all the things, janitor. So we, that was like my early years. We started having our family pretty right away. So I was newly in ministry. We were newly parents and, newly married. So it was a lot of new for us coming at us at that time. Also, our pastor was very missions minded. So we started taking a bunch of trips to the UK for church planning, outreaches we were doing there, a lot to Hungary and Russia. So that was the beginning of really like seeing the world for the first time for me. And it was all connected as well to worship ministry. We do a lot of outreach. We do a lot of, worship nights in those contexts as well. So yeah, that was kind of the beginnings for me. I ended up about 5 years later getting a call to pray about being the worship leader, worship pastor at Calvary Chapel Costa Mesa, where I grew up. And the pastor at the time at Calvary Vista is Chuck's son-in-law, Brian Broderson, and he ended up moving to London to pastor church, and then was moving back to Costa Mesa to do a 3-year transition with Pastor Chuck, because he wanted to kind of phase out and do a succession plan. So Brian was coming back and hiring guys to be part of that transition team. So I was one of those guys, and in 2000 we started kind of making moving that direction. And Chuck, after a year or two, he kind of put on the brakes and decided he didn't want to transition quite so quickly. So the 3-year transition plan turned into a long, slow 13-year transition plan. So that it was deeply challenging, for all the, probably obvious reasons, but also formative for me. In those years, we were doing my buddy Joey Brand had started a college ministry called Worship Generation. So at the time, I rewind a little bit. When I was the youth pastor at Calvary Chapel Vista, Phil Wickham and Evan Wickham were in my youth group, and they were kind of coming up as young worship leaders and just writing songs, and amazing kids. Just because John Wickham had left Calvary and moved to North County, San Diego, Maranatha Chapel church down there, but he was sending his kids to the school there, and they were coming to the youth group. So we were going on mission trips with these young guys, and I remember just being in Scotland with Phil at a young age, and he was just singing these amazing songs. We set up a battery-powered speaker, and hundreds of people were gathering around listening to this little kid sing his heart out for Jesus, and a bunch of people were coming to faith on the street. It was an incredible time. So anyways, fast forward back to now we're at Calvary, and we're doing this college ministry. And so at the time, Phil Wickham would rotate through, and Jeremy Camp would rotate through, and some of these other young leaders that were writing songs and, just passionate about following Jesus were coming through and be part of that. And we just saw this hunger, and all these young people that had this desire to serve the Lord, and a lot of musicians were there. And so I remember having a dream one night, and I rarely remember my dreams, but this one, I woke up like, oh, interesting. And I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. And it was this vision of doing a camp in the mountains for worship leaders, like that is Bible, as much Bible as we could give them, as much musical training as we could give them, as much leadership training, and pack it into a week. And my friend, I shared the vision with a friend, and he said, well, what about a school of worship? And I was like, school of worship? like, what would we do for a year? I couldn't think. I was trying to just wrap my brain around how would that actually work? What kind of content? What would we offer? So we started writing the ideas down and thinking about teachers in the area and who could be involved. And a year later, we launched the School of Worship there at Calvary Costa Mesa that we went on for about 21 years there at Calvary Chapel. So we just, it just wrapped up this last year, but we just saw the Lord really using it to prepare the next generation of young people that they were going to go, get a 4-year degree, or they'd thought about it, or with like a worship emphasis at some of the local Christian colleges. But a lot of those are very traditional. It was very like, hey, come, you're going to learn how to play in a bell choir and orchestrate music, which is all beautiful, I'm sure, and awesome, but just unusable and really unhelpful for the everyday average worship leader serving in a church. So we felt like the School of Worship was kind of filling this need for guys that wanted biblical training, musical training, leadership training, but they weren't really going to find that at their local university. And also it was cost prohibitive. I mean, you're paying, hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to school. So, most guys that feel called to ministry realize that, hey, I'm not going to be making this amazing salary per se to pay off this huge college debt. So it didn't make sense for them at that time. So we felt like the Lord was really, blessing it and using it to, lay the foundation of the next generation of young leaders kind of coming up. So yeah, it was awesome. Loved it. And that season kind of ended for me, but we're now in a season of like just caring for worship leaders that are currently in the trenches serving in the local church. So that's a little bit of the transition. We were preparing people before, and now we're caring for leaders that are serving. So
really cool to see the trajectory of your story, and even to hear about. I mean, I cannot imagine how sweet it would be to go back to be the worship pastor at the church you grew up in. Tell me about going back to Costa Mesa. And I know it was under the circumstances of assuming a leadership transition, but what were some things that stuck out to you as an adult who had come back to the place that you had, I'm assuming, had kind of come to faith in? You had probably come to know the Lord, accept Christ in Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, and then you come back as an adult to lead others in worship. So any significant memories or anything stick out as a part of that experience?
Yeah, I mean, I could probably talk about that alone for some hours, but yeah, very interesting, because I remember, leaving Bible college, leaving Orange County, and the Lord giving us a new start, at the time. And I met my wife, and she was from Washington State. And I just envisioned maybe the Lord taking us and leading us back to Washington, or I just couldn't picture, like, I felt no desire to go back to Orange County. It was like, it's a new day, a new season, following the Lord. And, but then the Lord led us to San Diego, serving there. And then, like, the moment I got the call to pray about coming back to Orange County, it's like all my desires had just changed. All of a sudden, I had this deep burden for the church I grew up at, and this real desire. I just wanted to be there and wanted to be around it. And I had been it was so formative for me, like my spiritual formation, looking back at those years of just in Bible study after Bible study. Chuck was known for his expositional teaching. So, like, if you went to Calvary, you would walk away, you'd know your Bible, because he would take you, he taught through the Bible like 8 times in his life, that was kind of his legacy. So he just walked away knowing the Bible. So having this, like, being deeply impacted by it and being called back there, I just felt this real, like, kind of this burden and calling, and the real word from the Lord, like he was sending me back to the place that I had grown up to pour back in. And I remember praying about it, and the Lord gave me this verse in Isaiah 58, I think 11 and 12, where it said that, you shall lay the foundation of the next generation. You'll be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of the streets. And I just felt like, God just works, one generation shall praise your works to another, it says in Psalm 145. And I just got so excited about the thought of maybe we could be a part of pouring into the next generation of young people coming up in Calvary. And so yeah, I felt very called, very excited, very passionate, very honored to be there. And then also very overwhelmed and very like the realization that I don't know, is, that the task ahead of me was way bigger than I could ever, that I wasn't really ultimately that qualified for that role. I mean, I had a heart for it. I had to lead worship for a few years. I stepped into this worship leader responsibility as both a worship leader, worship pastor with these musicians that had played for years and touring musicians. They're amazing. And, here I am, just your basic, 4 chords and the truth and singing songs and loving Jesus, but just not all this experience when it came to like leading bands and all that stuff. So, and teams and developing a culture and so many things. So I felt very honored and very overwhelmed, like undeserved to be there, over my head, that feeling for sure. Like, oh my gosh, there's the expectations that are there. There's the legacy of the guys that have gone before. So I was pretty, it was a mixture of all those things. So really honored, really excited, a lot of vision, but also very insecure and very, that sense of like, oh Lord God, like you have called me here, right? Like I need you every step of the way. Yep. And so the interesting dynamic of it was, we're in this transition, as you can imagine. Here's a legacy pastor, been there forever. He's kind of the leader of the Calvary Chapel movement. So him moving on was a huge deal. Like the thought of him transitioning out, and there really was, in some people's minds, there was nobody good enough that could ever replace Pastor Chuck, and he had pastored them for 40 years and cared for them and fed them and walked, married and buried them. So as in any church and every church that's been around for a while, that the pastor's there for a while, it's very challenging. That any type of transition is really super challenging. So being a part of the transition team, I knew it would be challenging. I just didn't know how challenging it would be. It kind of felt like it was a bit of like the Washington, D.C. of church politics in my experience because of that, because of, oh, you're part of that team. So whose side are you on? Are you with Brian or are you with Chuck? Like they're like want to divide and like, hey, we're a part of Jesus's team. This is Jesus's church. So it's just like you think of those passages in the New Testament, like I'm of Paul and I'm of Apollos, like this tribal nature that we all get into, like, well, this is my church and this is my pastor and you'll never be my pastor, that kind of thing, So you just see, it's not, the early church had some of the same problems. Obviously we have some of the same problems that the early church did. And so fascinating thing, really challenging, tough to navigate. And yet like God's call had just like anchored us there. And here we had 2 daughters at the time when we moved to Costa Mesa. We had 3 more. And I remember in that season too, like, oh my gosh, like just overwhelmed with where I'm in ministry, full-time ministry. I'm raising 5 daughters right down the street from this place called South Coast Plaza. It's like Fashion Central, and I'm just thinking, Lord, are you sure that you've called us here? This is crazy. It's crazy environment. It's Orange County. It's like, it's all about what you have and and what you look like and all those image things. So I just remember having some really challenging seasons of being overwhelmed as a dad of 5 daughters, and I'd be thinking down the road like, oh my gosh, 5 weddings, 5 son-in-laws. Oh Lord, have mercy.
Your team's gonna get big. The Cunningham crew is gonna get big.
Yeah, exactly. So it was all those things, but just watching the Lord provide for us. Like it shouldn't have worked. It didn't make sense on paper financially for us to live in Orange County on a ministry salary and with 5 kids. And we would just see the Lord provide in some amazing ways over the years. So I can just look back on the faithfulness of God and his kindness, even through the hard stuff, and just remember, wow, Lord, you've been so good to me beyond what I could have ever deserved. And, really, really grateful. I mean, you don't leave those experiences without, great blessing and also great challenge, great hurt that you walk through. I mean, you walk through some really challenging times. So you do kind of leave those things with a little bit of a limp. You're kind of working through the hard stuff and the hurtful stuff. And it's just unavoidable in life, period. But then, ministry can be very challenging, as it's like there's a spiritual dynamic that's connected to your walk with the Lord. It's connected to also your vocation, and so it can be very challenging in those situations. But so anyway, so that's actually leaving Costa Mesa, I wasn't totally sure what the Lord was going to do with us. I wasn't feeling really burdened or really like led towards another church or jumping back on a church staff, but I wasn't quite sure what was going to be next. And then this Likewise worship opportunity came up, and it was a chance to really care for leaders that were serving in the day-to-day. And I just felt like, gosh, if we could take some of the experience, some of the wisdom from some of the years of ministry, both of my failures and victories, if I could carry that into encouraging, again, younger leaders or come alongside leaders, is to be coach and be a friend or mentor or discipleship kind of relational things, then I would just love it. So it was, super honored to be a part of this team in this new season.
Yeah.
Before we continue on with the video, a quick word from our sponsor, the Worship Ministry School Accelerator Program. You may not know this, but in addition to all the YouTube content we're creating here at Churchfront, we also partner with local church worship and production ministries to help them hit their ministry goals. Over the past 4 years, we've worked personally with hundreds of worship ministries around the globe. We've helped churches navigate upgrading their worship tech, building better systems to grow their team of volunteers, as well as address any knowledge or skill gaps required for modern day worship ministry. When you join the Accelerator program, you get access to our entire library of online, on-demand courses, and you get unlimited access to our team of Churchfront coaches. To learn more about joining the program, click the link below this video to apply and schedule your free strategy session today. Now let's get back to the video.
I do want to park real quick to dive into a question that came to mind as you were sharing your story there. I think a lot of listeners could benefit, but in this season, as you talk with, whether it's from Likewise or if it's in another environment, man, I'm thinking through the people, the young men and women who God are kind of nudging towards ministry, right? They're feeling that call towards a ministry context. Not sure what that looks like. You're a prime example of somebody who, lived in an environment that was challenging, that culturally was kind of unique and probably pretty distinct in terms of, I would just call it's probably the opposite of what kind of the Christian life looks like a lot of the times, and maybe opposing there. But you had some logistics to coordinate. Like, you were thinking about raising a family and this call to ministry. And there's a phrase that you said, it probably shouldn't have worked. Like, financially, it made no sense for you to be in that season, raising a family on a pastor's salary, like all that kind of stuff. I wonder if you could speak into how you would advise somebody or coach somebody as they're discerning some of those callings these days. Like, when they're feeling that call from the Lord to step into a ministry context, as somebody who did navigate the practicalities of high cost of living, probably a pastor's salary, like, what would be some things that, if you could go back and talk to yourself, as you were getting started, what would be some of those maybe practical application pieces that you would encourage yourself with, even that might apply to some listeners going through that season right now?
Oh, totally. Yeah, that's a good question. I know every one of our situations are unique, and calling is unique. I do feel one of the things that is common to most people that are really called towards vocational ministry is there you kind of walk into it knowing that there will be a cost, that there will be a challenge. Now, any vocation in the marketplace or in the ministry will have its challenges. But one of the ones I think that's unique to ministry itself is a financial challenge. I mean, it's rare that there's a well-paying position that kind of meets maybe the needs of the local, community and the cost of living. I mean, there are some, but a lot of times it tends to be, in my experience, it's their churches, would pay more if they could. Most of the times they can't. Most of the times they also don't want to, be on the exorbitant side of paying people, the optics of that, what it could look like, to paying them too much, or that kind of a thing too. So there's this, they're really trying to be, I know a lot of pastors that wrestle with that. How do I set the salary for our team and for their position and responsibilities? And so over the years, they would do these surveys locally to try to set like an average median salary for pastors or worship leaders in the area, to try to make sure that they've done their due diligence and that they're doing it right. So, but that tends to be something where it's not, it's not a ton. So you're usually, challenged in that area. I think most guys are. You're making some sacrifices there. For us, my wife, we felt like it was more valuable for her to really pour into our kids than to her to get another job and then, find babysitters or childcare or whatever. We felt more led towards, hey, let's invest in our kids. Let's make the sacrifices that are needed. We won't have the stuff, but we'll have invested in our kids, and that felt more valuable to us. So it's different for everybody in every family, in every situation. So I don't know that, we're going to be the example of how you should do it. But I feel like there is something where when you're going to vocational ministry, you really want to know, I think the call, the call of God, the specific leading of the Holy Spirit in your life, those are the anchor points that will keep you there through the hard stuff. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of really difficult times, and financially and culturally and transition stuff and personally. I mean, just go through these ups and downs of life and ministry. And what really anchored us there, I feel like, was we kept coming back to this. Well, we really believe God called us here. He hasn't shown us anything different. He has provided for us. I mean, it's not, it's not crazy provision, but it's enough. We're okay. God's taking care of us. So for us, we would kind of weigh all those all the time. Like, is this ridiculous, or is this like God's call?
Yeah.
Is this foolish, or is this God's call? So you don't want to like over spiritualize it, but you don't want to forget that call that I think is the biggest anchor to wherever the Lord puts you, specifically in vocational ministry. But that could also be in the marketplace for those that God calls, leads into a specific other vocation. They know the Lord has them there. There's the obvious challenges there, but they feel anchored. So I think the rule of, the principle applies to all believers. Like 99.9% of Jesus followers are going to work in the marketplace. They're not going to work in the four walls of a church. But they are, seeking the Lord and want to be used by the Lord and be available to the Lord, whatever that is. So I think there always will be a cost and a challenge there to following the Lord. But I do wish I would have been a little wiser, younger, with things like saving for retirement, even if it was $50 a month or something, or just putting away and getting ready, because those years go so fast. I wish I would have thought, a little bit, been more thoughtful in that area, more diligent in that area. As I got older, I realized it had been years and years before I had really thought about that at all and really invested in that. And kind of our church stream was very focused. I mean, a big part of our theology was the rapture of the church, So I remember as a young Christian, they're like, oh, opt out of Social Security. And if you're ordained, you can opt out of that. So basically it was a way that the church didn't have to pay you as much, but you get more in your paycheck. But if you weren't wise to like actually go and invest that in like, a 401k or just put something away for the future, if you did that, you were good, but most guys didn't because they were just trying to make it. So I would suggest to a young leader, even in ministry, to be thoughtful about those things, because man, life goes so fast. It's like a blink of an eye. You're raising your kids, raising your family, and all of a sudden they're jumping into their life and their vocation, and then you're like, oh wow, I have maybe 20 years left of work, and I haven't really thought about retirement as much. So I think for young Scott, I would have gone back and just, Scott, you should have, be more wise in that area and be more diligent and more thoughtful and have better conversations. I think I was so honored to be in ministry, so thankful that the Lord would open this door, and I didn't feel like I didn't even bring those conversations up to leadership because I just felt like unworthy to be there anyway,
Sure.
So it felt like I was asking, I'd be asking for something, way beyond what I deserve. But I think, again, it was just some immaturity in my own life. So I would say there's some just practical wisdom when you're thinking about the future and your family, and those things. Yeah. I also would encourage young leaders too to have another skill set, another vocation, like another something to fall back on in times of, change and transition, or, if they got a degree in something else, if it was in finance or in, business or something like that, that they could, just lean on in times where maybe the resources weren't there to support them anymore in that calling. They could have a tent making skill, as we would call that. Mm-hmm. Those things can be really helpful, just making yourself, as versatile as possible for those things in the future. It's funny with worship creatives, it feels like oftentimes they hire you as the worship leader, but you're also the graphic designer. You're the, you're the youth pastor as well, or, all these different things. So I went back to seminary in 2019 to get like a master's in biblical leadership.
Okay.
Because I realized I'm getting older. My role will change eventually. Like, I love leading worship. I want to lead worship, as long as I can. But in some ways, there's a certain language, like a musical language that you speak of your generation. That's always on the move. It's changing. And so you realize, okay, well, am I going to be leading worship when I'm 60? Well, I'd love to be, but will I be? So, when I'm 65, when I'm 70, probably not. I mean, I'll still want to, but probably won't.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's the old guy, he can barely sing and barely walk. So I was at this stage of like, okay, I'm in my 40s. And so I should really be like investing in these leaders coming up and giving them opportunity and pouring into them to replace me. Because knowing that my role will change. And so going back to school was like, okay, I want to retool a little bit. I want to invest to be ready for change, because change is coming for me, and it did. And so that was actually helpful. It was good to kind of like, be challenged in other areas academically and biblically and theologically and in leadership. So knowing that my role would change as I got older. So yeah, interesting dynamics looking back, but it's been sweet to see how the Lord has led us along the way.
Yeah. I just see so many, I mean, with kind of the cost of living just about everywhere, in the States, at least, most people are, who are looking to get into the workplace, they're looking at joining a church or joining a ministry of some sort, and they're going, I just don't even know how that works, and a lot of times we're trusting God to fill in the gaps and we're holding the hands open-handedly, but it's getting harder and harder to do that. And the amount of sacrifice you would have to make to actually, make it a smooth transition or a working transition for a family or a young family is getting more and more challenging. So more people that I know, more ministry, like called ministry leaders, very skilled in the area, they're going to the workplace. They're going to the kind of to go get kind of a normal 9-to-5 job, if you will, and then they're balancing this like struggle of, man, what do I do with this conviction that the Lord has put in my heart, and also the need to provide for my family or to lead my family to think of financial stability in the future. I feel like churches should be the first place, because of the sacrifices we make to be on church staffs. I feel like the churches should be the first place that they do some financial education for their staff, early on. When you join, you can go through a financial piece or something of that nature to kind of help you get your ducks in a row so that you can be really prepared for the future. And but I love what you said about the worship leader being, you got the tech, the communications, the musician. Like, I think oftentimes we view ourselves as just musicians and we go, what would I do if I wasn't a worship leader? But it's like, if you really crank down into what you do for your church, you're in like team management, project management, marketing. You're kind of in like a technology role where you're setting up and tearing down for event management. You might be a communication graphic designer. So you've got some areas you can dig into in those skill sets. So I just appreciate you sharing some insight there. I think it'll be helpful for folks.
Yeah, that's so true. We ran conferences. We do 2 worship conferences a year. Those alone, it's like project management, people management. I mean, you're, financial man. I mean, there's so many areas, and then the creative piece of it, and then you're, I mean, you're trying to find other people to come alongside you to help take some of that load, because it's a lot. But yeah, you do realize in ministry, I mean, you're doing a ton of different things, and it's actually good. It's part of our development of growing in our our gifts and discovering other gifts, and then also realizing, okay, this isn't a strong gift. I need to really, delegate this to somebody that they're passionate about this thing, administration, man, they love administration. So I want to give that to them. So, so those kind of things. It's so true. So yeah, you can walk away from ministry realizing actually there's a lot I could offer. Actually, a lot of people skills, right? Because you're dealing with people all the time, in difficult situations. I'm dealing we had a school of worship of 50, 60 students, and they're all creatives, so they're all deep feelers and the emotional roller coasters they would go on and stuff. So you kind of learn how to walk through that with people. So people skills alone, you really do grow in. Yeah. So there's a lot there, but that's good. I like that too. I think that you're right. Everything's changing. It's a different day financially, just to make it as a family. Usually guys are trying to find a few, they have a few different hustles going on to keep the, the lights on and the family provided for. But I have seen the Lord just make a way and provide in ways that are just unforeseen. So there's always that element. And I do feel like finances are the one area that keep us more dependent on the Lord than anything else. It's good. Like, Lord, if you don't come through, we can't do this. And so there is a sense where the more that I have, sometimes the more independent I become of the Lord. And I would like to think I could handle a ton of resources, and Lord, I'd be great. I would be such a good steward of all this stuff. And
let's try it out.
But probably, yeah. Lord, could you test me with it real quick? I'd like to try. But the reality is probably I would be more independent and leaning on my own wisdom and maybe making decisions outside of seeking the Lord. So yeah, finance is have a way of really keeping us real just close to the Lord, and He's our provider, He's our shepherd, and that's good. And I feel like as well as ministers, it's the same thing with music ministers, with pastors, with leaders. You don't get away with really teaching a lot of things without also having to really learn them practically.
Yes, so true.
I think that's one of the one things, was it where James said, don't let many of you be teachers, because there is something, it's great to teach. It's wonderful to teach other people, but it's different. Like when it's just information that we're giving people, we think, I'm just going to study and I'm going to relay information. I'm going to tell them what they need to do. The Lord's like, yeah, well, I think what we want to do is probably learn that stuff first by experience, and then you can share. So the challenge of ministry, I think oftentimes is the Lord allowing us to go through challenging seasons to learn things that we would learn no other way than being tested and challenged, so that we actually have a testimony of God's faithfulness to share from experience God's kindness and grace and His provision. It's the thing I dislike the most about ministry, but it's also the thing I love the most. I hate going through the hard stuff, but the fruit of it is like, wow, I actually can take this and share it and encourage other people with it. So it actually becomes fruitful ministry, caring for others with the comfort and the care the Lord has given to us. So there's the trade-off. So those that are in ministry, there's a cost of like, okay, we're going to learn some things that maybe I would avoid if I wasn't doing this. But I'm going to be able to take that and hopefully care for others better through some wisdom and encouragement that I've received from the Lord.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. And I think that'll resonate really deeply with a lot of the listeners. And now you're seeing that. You saw that as you started a school of worship, but you're now even seeing that in your role with Likewise and your ability to kind of use your testimony, like you said, to speak into even just caring and kind of nurturing some of these guys and gals who are coming in. I'd be curious to know your insights and reflections. What do you think the biggest void or area for concern right now in worship ministry, tech ministry, kind of that vein of leaders is in this current season of the church? Because you saw kind of the school of worship side where you were preparing and kind of giving these people the year of experience to kind of get developed. And so you saw where the holes in their knowledge were, but now you're actually seeing some of the people who have been doing ministry for a while and now need some oversight and care, some healing. So what do you think as leaders we can be aware of, cautious of, and paying attention to in terms of areas for concern or of caution in our own lives?
Totally. There's a number of them. I think the first one that comes to mind is probably the idea of when your gifting exceeds your character, you're kind of in a dangerous spot. So So as you grow in your gifting musically and in the practical things, which tend to be a strong drive for us creatives, we want to get better at what we're doing. We need to simultaneously grow in our depth and understanding and character, and theologically, devotionally, understanding, knowing the Word of God, the concepts, the biblical truths, the theological depth, like mining those depths to actually have something to say and something to sing. I think those are really important because I've seen a lot of guys that are extremely gifted, but they're very shallow in their character and in their walk with the Lord. So they have great opportunity, but they don't last very long because they're immediately tested. Excuse me. Challenged by the position that they hold, the responsibility. So gifting might open the door for you, but character is what's going to actually keep you there and anchor you there. So growing in theological, I'd say theological and devotional. So not just information, although it's very important, theological truth and understanding kind of the role of the minister and what it looks like to be, truly caring for others, the equipping of the saints for the work of the ministry. So as much Bible theological stuff as possible, but also devotional. Like don't let it just be information. Don't let it just be like, I got a lot of friends that are very theological minded. They're incredible. They know so much information. But what I'm usually impressed by is the guys that have that as well, but they have a real simple devotional, like childlike love for Jesus and dependence on the Lord as well. So cultivating both of those, I think, in the area of ministry is really important because, you want ministry to be an overflow from your relationship with Jesus. When it becomes a job and primarily like a business venture, then you just get off track. So yeah, I think I have a hard time when it feels like the church, the institutional church, the organization of the church feels primarily like a business. So it's like best practices, and we're going to grow this thing, and we're going to put these things in place so that it's. None of the things are bad, but it just becomes the gas pedal as opposed to, hey, the focus of being glorifying the Lord, equipping the saints, loving the people, caring for the people, seeing them grow in their faith and seeing them become strong. So a lot of times churches, it's about the numbers, and they got the giving thermometer, and every week it's like, we're getting closer to our giving, it's like, and we're pushing this thing that we want to it feels at times like it's a financial institution, right? We're trying to just grow this thing to get more money. We want more people because that's more money, and then more money means bigger buildings and bigger influence and bigger outreach. And those things aren't all. Those aren't. They're bad if that's the motivation. If God blesses and it's an overflowing cup and resources, amen. What a blessing, But I think sometimes that actually can turn into a curse. I think the Western church, sometimes we're blessed with resources, we're cursed with resources, and pastors feel this pressure to be successful. They don't want it to die on their watch. They don't want it to go down. They want the budgets to stay the same. And so it's a challenge. It's a really difficult thing. Hence, we see a lot of worship leaders who are hired to be the utilitarian device to grow the church. So you're going to come in this expectation put on them to be, this amazing whatever, because they they want to see their church grow, and people come to church for the music, right? So that's the common thing that they say. Right. People come because of the worship. So it's got to be good, and so this kid that loves Jesus and they just want to lead other people in worship, they enter this pressure cooker of like you need to be amazing, you need to be the draw, you need to like perform, and all of a sudden something that was like, no, we're gonna worship Jesus together, it turns this corner, like I need to be this performer, this entertainer. I need to make sure that people love it when they come. And so it's tricky. And again, I'm probably painting a very extreme picture. That's probably an extreme, scenario, but it's not uncommon. I've seen it often. And so we have a lot of young leaders that get deeply burnt out and discouraged because they go into ministry thinking it's going to be a certain way, and they're in it. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is a business. This is, oh, you're wanting me to, and so they get a little disillusioned, like, I thought it was going to be different. So I think as leaders, we have to be very careful in how we lead. and in the way that we lead, and our philosophical approach to how we're leading, and the way that we talk, different things, and careful for those that we're leading, because we're setting the example, we're setting the culture, we're hopefully pointing people to Jesus and what it means, what it looks like to be the church of Jesus Christ, not just a church that we're trying to build this organization. So anyway, just some thoughts on a little bit of a hot horse. I think I can sometimes be ultra critical. I need to be careful, and there's a lot of beauty, there's a lot of good, there's a lot of wonderful things that happen in the gathering of the church. I just think that in some ways, and I guess in my opinion, I think we just need to keep centered in that. There's always going to be business elements of that, because there's laws, and there's a staff, and there's resources and stuff that tend to come along with that. But trying to walk that line in a way that is healthy is important, in my opinion.
What are some things, I'd be curious as to know, what are some things that you feel like worship leaders can be using or doing to help combat against some of that surprise and some of that that shock, or even in their role, to protect against some of that bitterness, jadedness against institutionalizing the church? If you want a church to thrive, there's got to be some organizational leadership. We have episodes with pastors talking about kind of the need for structure and the need for organization, and some org chart kind of things to make sure that there's health and sustenance in the church. But what are some things that individually, these leaders can be doing on the regular, to make sure that they're staying in a healthy framework, mindset, perspective in their roles?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's good to bring that balance in. I think you just did that well, Luke. Because what a blessing. You're a creative. You're a worship leader. You can be supported by the church to provide for your family and get to serve the Lord while doing it. So those are huge blessings for sure. To be honest, but yes, I think the way one of the ways that you can kind of guard against that, I think, is by developing strong friendships and community with other leaders as well. Because I think you're going to find that in leadership, you get kind of isolated. You can feel alone. You can feel all that pressure coming your way. There's a very intense spiritual battle happening at the same time. So having other leaders and other friends that are going through the same struggle, that you can kind of talk with each other through it. You can pray with each other through it. You can kind of have a safe place to bounce off. I feel frustrated about this. I don't understand it. They can maybe give you a balanced view of it and understanding it differently, or the way they've approached it. Those strategic friendships have been so life-giving for me. I think it's really important to have a mentor, somebody that is older than you, somebody that's done ministry longer, been around, been through those ups and downs, those challenges, to help navigate it. I think those are important things. So, and I think that mentor should probably be, in my opinion, maybe outside the church that you're in, if possible, because I think sometimes you just need a place to, for someone to share with, and you don't feel like your job's on the line if you say something wrong, or if you just have a safe space to do that. Because it's tricky. Leadership's tricky in ministry, because in some ways you're expected to have it all together. So you feel like you have to carry this action to make sure, I'm totally great, nothing's wrong, I have no problems. You have to present yourself this way. Most don't have the permission to struggle, and certain. I know a lot of really healthy churches where they do, so what happens with that is that leads to isolation and being very alone, and then sometimes it leads to unhealthy escapes, because they're feeling the pressure, they're struggling themselves, they don't know who to talk to, don't know how to work through it. They feel like if they shared certain struggles, they might even lose their job, which is the way they provide for the family. So they isolate even more. I think so. Healthy mentorship, which the friendship piece as well is important, because that's also friendship, and it's accountability. It's also mutual encouragement, that you, like Peter would say, knowing that the same sufferings are experienced by your brothood in the world. It's really good to know, this is not uncommon. I'm struggling with the same stuff. I'm challenged with the same stuff. They can pray for each other. That's what I love about Likewise. It's kind of a way that we get to provide community to hopefully build strategic friendships that they can lean on and walk through life with a little bit, ministry with, instead of being isolated. Some churches get a little tribal. They're in their own world. Some guys just get so busy they don't have enough time. They feel like they've got so much going on. How do we even, find time to meet with other people? But I would just say, I encourage you guys, hey, once a month, reach out, even if it's a cold call, reach out to the church down the street, call the worship leader and say, hey, would you want to grab some coffee sometime? Just start developing friendships in the area, because you're going to learn things from them that you wouldn't have learned otherwise. You might have a really, like, an amazing friendship spark from that. You might be able to actually encourage them in some way. So I would say reach out to other churches, even if you don't know who they are. Just say, hey, I'm so-and-so down the street. Would you want to grab some coffee? Just want to get to know you and learn, develop a friendship, whatever. Super important. So I think early on in ministry, coming out of Bible college, I was so idealistic of what I thought ministry should be and would be. Because you're immersed in this, you're in the Bible 24 hours a day, you're in this little bubble of Bible college, and everyone's like praying for each other and talking about Jesus. And all of a sudden you're on a church staff. And I remember first being on a church staff, like, wait, they let that guy be a pastor on staff? How's that possible? I was like spiritually judgmental. Like, wait, who let that guy, or wait, shouldn't we be praying more? Shouldn't we be doing this? And then over time, the Lord kind of showing me that I had some spiritual pride in my own heart, but also like, if the Lord can use them, Scott, then maybe he could use you too.
That's right.
It's like, oh, you're right. I have my own issues. I have my own problems. And
yep.
So I think, I was talking to a lady last night at a gathering, and she was working at a church for 20 years, and she was sharing how she was deeply hurt by the leadership and by the culture and expectations and people. And yet she also recounted a lot of beauty, but she was saying that, man, but there was just a lot that I went through. I didn't realize it was going to be this way, and I felt very alone. So that's not an uncommon thing. And she goes, if I didn't have somebody to talk to when I transitioned off, she goes, I felt like I could have even deconstructed my faith. I feel like I would have maybe never gone back to church. So just knowing that when you enter into ministry too, and like a vocational ministry, some church cultures are extremely healthy. They're cheering each other on, they're praying for each other, praying with each other. They've set it up to where they're caring for the leaders as well as they're caring for the body, and those are beautiful. I have a friend at a very large church locally that their church is no perfect church, but they do it really well. I mean, they do it well to where they're caring for the team, they're caring for their volunteers. They're giving them a lot of rest and opportunity to refresh. And so it can be done. I have noticed in a lot of churches that it's such a reoccurring like your calendar, your church calendar is so busy. There's your services each week. You're developing teams. You have prayer meetings. You have rehearsals. You've got special events. You've got mission trips, and it's both amazing. It's both awesome, but stay on that merry-go-round for a few years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and it's a recipe for burnout. It's a recipe for disaster. Because when you're young and hungry, like, I'll do it all. I'm the servant, and I'll say yes to everything, and I want to be there and do it. So as you get older, you realize, oh no, I actually need to really stay focused on my calling. I also need to make sure I'm not neglecting my family.
Yep.
And I want to make sure that I have healthy rhythms of life. So healthy rhythms of rest, healthy rhythms of play, healthy rhythms of working. One of my friends said, if ministry is your hobby, you're an idiot. And what he meant by that is like, hey, enjoy other things in life. Like find life-giving things to enjoy with your family, and to go do things and find life-giving wells when you go do that with your family or your wife or these are just really helpful. The kind of life rhythm balance, because in ministry typically you're giving, and giving out with usually it's a lot. You're going there emotionally with people. You're physically working a lot of hours. There's a lot going on. So that's been a huge one for me. I wish I would have learned that when I was younger. I would say that to anybody younger or older. I think I shared about it at the conference. We were talking about Hebrews chapter 12 of run your race with endurance, looking unto Jesus. And I always understood endurance as like harder, stronger, faster. Keep going, go, endure. And as I've gotten older, I go, no, I think what we were Paul was teaching, or Hebrews was teaching in that passage, is that to run with a healthy pace of life.
Yeah.
Like, what's a healthy pace? Endurance, you have to pace yourself. So to run well and to run long, you need to like have a healthy pace. So times of great rest, times of having fun with your family, just enjoy them. Those years go so fast with the young family and your wife.
Yeah.
So just, don't be anxious about the future, and don't be anxious about missing out on something. Just enjoy your family and enjoy the ministry and enjoy the season of life that you're in, and find healthy boundaries, some things to say no to. Man, I'd love to do that. I just can't be away from my family one more night. I just need to be. So those are the things I wish I would have been better at younger. We were such a busy ministry. We had, Sunday morning, 3 Sunday morning, then a Sunday night, a Monday night, a Wednesday night, a Saturday night, and then other stuff throughout the week. It's just always going. And when you're young, you're like, it was the kind of the culture of, Chuck would teach, 3 Sunday morning, then he'd do a verse by verse on Sunday night, then he'd do it in depth on Wednesday night, and then we'd have Saturday night study. There would be a rehearsal somewhere in there that week. We have special events, conferences. We had 3 conference centers. So we're hosting, worship leaders conference, pastors conference, missions conference, women's conference, men's conference. I mean, it's just always going. And I was excited to be involved with all of it, but after a number of years, I didn't realize that I was burning out. I really didn't have nothing to give. I was super tired. I had 5 kids at home, a wife who needed me more. And I just was saying yes to a lot of things I should have said no to. So
you're getting getting the reps, within like a third of the time that you would normally at a pace like that. A lot of worship leaders, they've got 1 or 2 services a weekend, and that's kind of it. And so it takes them a long time to get kind of that 10,000 hours of expertise and repetition under their belt. But for you guys, man, you're hitting that in, no time at all, because you just are doing it on repeat all the time. So, man, it's something to pay attention to. And the pacing is definitely, it'll keep you in ministry longer if you're able to set yourself up for success, to run the race with endurance, like you said. Man, Scott, I know that we've touched on a ton today that will be so valuable for listeners. And I already know that I'm going to get comments about this and saying, man, how do I kind of step into a place where I have mentorship and things? So I definitely want you to have a space to, briefly share about Likewise, and what does it look like for somebody to check that out? What does that look like when somebody gets, plugged into it? What are some of the options that Likewise offers? And so just briefly share kind of the elevator pitch, if you will, about what that is, what that entails.
Yeah. So the way that we've kind of set it up is, for me personally, I do a lot of one-on-ones throughout the month. So I'll have guys that I'll meet with for the first time, just developing friendships and relationships to kind of let them know about it, invite them to our once-a-month gatherings. Sometimes I'm meeting with guys recurring throughout the week just to kind of develop a mentorship, a discipleship thing. They've expressed that they want that. And so, just for me, it's more of a soul care focus. I just want to care for the leader. And so I think it's what I wish I would have had when I was I needed someone to really pour into me in some of those seasons. I would have it kind of here and there. But I think I needed some regular, like, guys, hey, how are you doing? How's your wife doing? How is your family doing? How are you getting rest? Are you enjoying, like, just pushing back on the areas of weakness that I'd have to be too busy, say yes to stuff. So anyway, for Likewise, we do like a mentorship thing for really kind of a soul care thing. Then we do a once a month gathering. So it's usually with a soul care focus. We'll have a worship leader come up and share their testimony of like, how they're called into ministry and some highlights and then some lowlights. We want them to share, hey, this has been hard in this area, kind of to lead with vulnerability so that other people can feel like, okay, yeah, no, I'm not alone. Like I'm, that's our big thing is that you're not alone. You are not alone in the struggle. There's huge blessings, but there's huge challenges. And then we do a once a year retreat where we get away. We're going to Forest Home here in California coming up in September.
Cool.
And we encourage you guys to bring their spouse. It's not like a conference in the sense that, there's this heavy schedule. It's more of a retreat where in the mornings we'll have some teaching. We'll have lunch, have the rest of the day open, and night to just hang out with their spouse, slow down, rest, take naps, have fun together, get away, be with other like-minded believers. So that retreat is a really like a restorative and renewing retreat. We bring in leaders that speakers that just really want to pour into the leader themselves, like soul care for the leader. And we have a guy this year named Steve Cuss. It's a great last name. He's got some amazing resources for leaders, just to really caring for them personally. And he's going to come in. He's from Australia. He lives in the States, but just a really, really wise guy. Just a lot of experience, and so it's going to be awesome. So this year is Forest Home. The next year we're going to take a cruise. So we have a little local cruise that goes out of Long Beach. It's four nights, kind of 5 days, and so that'll be our next 2024 thing. Just getting away, same thing. Just enjoying your spouse. If you're single, come as well. Have the accommodations for that. But also, if you're married, bring your spouse. Get away for a couple of days. Be restored, refreshed. So we're just trying to find ways to resource care for leaders with one-on-ones, once-a-month gatherings, and once-a-year retreats. We have some online curriculum we have something called Academy, which we're developing curriculum for young leaders, high school, college age leaders that just want to have some biblical kind of foundational things. Developing more of that, like on the more the academy side of stuff. So we have a lot of high schools, Christian high schools, that are taking that curriculum and using them for their young people, and then college as well. So we have a music arm as well. We're developing, new songs, new music, new leaders that are writing, just giving, supporting them to get their songs out there. And so there's a music arm of it too. So that's likewise in a nutshell. And there's a lot kind of more to it, but that's kind of the gist of it.
Well, I'll definitely list the website in the show notes, because it's a good place to get started, to check out some of the different branches and arms of the organization, and you can read up about it. You can kind of check out who is on their team and the different even locations that likewise is put themselves into to be a resource there for ministry leaders. So Scott, it's been just awesome to chat, and I really have enjoyed our conversation, the wisdom and insight that you've been able to share from your own story. I really appreciate you being vulnerable with our audience and being willing to kind of equip them where they're at. So thank you for your time today.
Oh man, thanks for having me, Luke. It's been an honor. Appreciate it.